Good morning, and how are you? My name's host Derek. I'm the host of Talking with Famous People, the internet television program that airs remarkably frequently and pretty consistently. You know, I live stream for hours every day, just about every day. Acacia, good morning. Today's live stream provides a bit of follow up to yesterday's question, as it has occurred to me between then and now that perhaps the answer might be if you were to, for example, let's say our universe and experience is either a simulation or an actual universe or experience and set of experiences by set up by God to do something, or by some supreme alien race whose technology is so advanced we might as well call them God, right? If it's set up to do something, it would be set up potentially to, just as ESPN runs simulations on football games, and they'll run that simulation multiple times, and they won't run it enough for every conceivable outcome to be simulated, but they will run it enough to get a good display of possibilities on the likely outcomes, and then kind of average them together to get the most likely outcome, or the outcome is more likely than any other, depending on how they do the probabilities and stuff, right? But what if instead of running multiple simulations in a single game, you keep playing the game until every possible thing in the game has happened, regardless of um, it's like, because there's no time limit on the game and no concrete metric for scoring the game, then one imagines the purpose of it not to determine which play out of possibilities is most likely, but rather to determine all the possible things that might happen in a game if it were to extend forever. So, like, you could imagine that God figure, or whoever it is that's setting this up, as running then multiple universes as well, and accordingly trying to determine if each universe manifests all possibilities given enough time. So that would be potentially a question that our universe could be purposed to answer. You're not a rat butt. Thanks. I'm glad you don't think I'm a rat butt. I'm more of like a rat's back, maybe kind of like a rat's, I don't know, sense of curiosity. Probably the highest virtue you could say about a rat. Maybe it's self-preservation instincts. Its ability to get flat and go under doors. So the thing is, I think that's a good observation to make about what you might call a way to meaningfully inform and narrow the cosmological, the Greek cosmological question, the central cosmological question. People, well, you'll occasionally encounter somebody presenting an answer to this great cosmological question, but it's usually the answer that Johnny presents in one of his songs where he says, life doesn't have a meaning, it's inherently a gift. Find something in the meaningless, and I don't know, something like that. So anyway, in that song, Johnny is making a claim regarding the answer to the grand cosmological question. He's saying life has no meaning. Not only does it have no purpose, but it has no meaning. It's like find enjoyment in the absurdity and meaninglessness or something like that, he says. I don't know. Well, the point is, people do posit answers to the grand cosmological question, but you don't generally hear them positing specific answers to the other side of the cosmological question, or the other possible answer to the cosmological question. So, on the binary issue of life, does life have a grander meaning or purpose? The answer is going to be binary, either yes or no. If no, then you get Johnny's articulation of things, right? Life doesn't have a meaning, and you just try to live it for your own purposes, basically, or whatever. Also, on that side of the equation are other formulations of essentially the same answer. Like, life does have meaning, but, it's what you make of it. It's whatever meaning you make. Well, you're not saying that life universally has any meaning in the sense that that an individual can either, fulfill their destiny or fail to fulfill it kind of meaning. You're talking about a very relativistic understanding of meaning in that context. So that would fall under the category of meaninglessness, right? Of universal meaninglessness. That all your meaning is only particularist. So, but on the other side of the equation, possible answers. I mean, certainly people have posited simulation theory before, but I haven't heard articulated before a specific explication of what they might be attempting to glean from the simulation. And I find this articulation of a specific thing they're trying to find, specific question they're trying to answer, namely, whether or not each universe manifests all possibilities given enough time, or whether there are independent, unique realities irrevocably linked to a given universe's particularist path, you know? Asking the question of whether existence itself uh, is like consciousness, you know, half universal, half particularist. Therefore, each manifestation of consciousness is to some extent unique. That's the sort of question I can conceive of a universe maker wanting to answer. So it gives one a good frame through which to understand the cosmological question, I guess. If you're answering it in the affirmative that yes, life has a purpose or a meaning. Well, what's your position on it, Eric? My position is that yes, life has a purpose or a meaning. But I don't need to feel as though I have particular clarity about what that purpose or meaning might be in general, although I do feel like I'd like additional clarity about what my purpose or meaning might be. So, while I find what I've articulated here this morning regarding the question of purpose and meaning informative to the larger cosmological question, it's not a cosmological question I myself am in the process of answering for myself. And the cosmological question that I am in the process of answering about myself, for myself, well, I don't spend a lot of time really working on that thing, you know. Really working on that part. Rat on a stick is a roasted rat dish consumed in Vietnam and Colombia. Rat on a stick. I will never order that dish. I promise everybody that. Hero Lamb says, you mentioned Rachel used to live in a bad environment. What does this do to her personality, like being in survival mode all the time? Yeah, I know. I get you, not just physical. I think it sours a person, you know? Rachel was unavoidably somewhat bitter and angry. I think less bitter and angry than I would have been. But yeah, that was trouble. I think what it does ultimately is it pushes people back into their first and second function. If Acacia, you're positing that answer in response to Hero Lamb's question, I don't think it works that way at all. I think it pushes them back to their first, second function. The more ontological assault they're in, the more they sit in their first function. Because it's the only part of themselves they fully trust, you know? And I think you can see the decay of person that happens in the instance of my friend Corey, who's been subjected to an ontologically assaultive environment for the entirety of his marriage. And it's slowly destroyed him, you know? But I think if you are not I think if you're not damaged from childhood abuse, then there's a very good chance that you can heal. You can recover from an ontologically difficult environment, get better, return to who you are, find yourself again, etc. Well, that's very much retreating to your first and second function here, Lamb. FI and SE, Fuck you, I'm doing what I want. Any SI can't see the wood for the trees. Well, it is, the thing is, you need to remember that, like, I've got NE as my first function, I've got NI as my fifth function. So I'm much more an intuitive than I am a sensor. And even though I'm an SI user, I've got good NI clarity about a lot of topics because they're my fourth and fifth. You tend to have fluency in your fourth and fifth functions, whatever that kind of function is. So, um, what we can say about SINI and forest and trees, as the analogy is usually used, is that uh, NI has a tendency to forget the forest is made up of trees, and SI has a tendency to forget that all of these trees make up a forest. So yeah, NI's big picture, SI's little picture, but you know, slot matters a lot. FI is not toxic. What we were saying, Depth Artisan, is that if you are faced with a persistent ontologically assaultive environment, like my friend Corey is, you'll get pushed back into your first and second functions in a fairly toxic expression of those. In Harold's case, his first function is FI. So he's saying how when he was in an ontologically assaultive situation and it persisted for a while, he started expressing that first and second function in more toxic ways. Well, this does, live streaming does tie into hedonism because it is escapist. It's escapist for me, and it's probably escapist for you too. The people who are here a lot, it's because it's a comfortable place for them to hang out and not be engaged in concrete impact related stuff, right? Sometimes you can think you're being attacked, but aren't. It's blurry, which also sucks. It's hard. Yeah, well, it's also hard if you're FI polar and you assume you're never being attacked. Like that every critique needs to be evaluated on its merits rather than as an expression of the intention of the person issuing the critique. That is a recipe for staying in a horrible relationship for 2.5 years, like I did. Well, that is a way to think about FI and FE, but it's not a good way. So FI people, one of the main qualities of FI, for example, is harm prevention. Because I value Rachel a lot, I will try to prevent harm done to her. You might say that I'm helping her out selflessly, and presumably she'll try to prevent harm to me, and that she's helping me out selflessly, but that's not the case. Um, we just, that's the nature of loving something, holding it precious, right? So in contrast, two FE users might be very socially graceful with one another, polite, considerate in their expressions of whatever. In other words, prioritize what the other person wants to do. But if you get two FE people together, then you might end up with both of them want to prioritize what the other person's FI is, neither person having FI, and you end up in those, I don't know, where do you want to go to eat kind of things. Acacia is now Ruben. Acacia is not Ruben. Okay. She's a different person than Ruben. I've met both of them. They're definitely different people. I mean, it's possible that Ruben and Acacia is one person who kept sneaking into their room to change clothes, but I'm pretty sure I saw them both at the same time, at least at some point. Deft Artisan says I used to be rather sadistic due to my father. Occasionally, she is. Okay, show me, dear. You get a wonder point. You get a wonder point for that. Do you like to say that, Acacia? Do you say that you like to do things occasionally? That means, according to Acacia's ways, whatever you do, don't mention Noam Chomsky. I was actually pleasantly surprised by a lot of the quotes I read from him. You know, it was kind of interesting noting the distinctions between, like noting the spots where ENTP and ENFP align and where we don't. We align on things like his position on education, that it ought to be, individuated to, he didn't put it this way exactly, but individuated to, with under the frame of like actualizing individual students rather than, meet our standardized bullshit kind of approach that we take now. I agree with that entirely. I think he's right about that, But of course, what you see there is ENTP and ENFP both respecting the sort of respecting first and foremost those kinds of intellects that are disruptive to standardization, right? But then you see him take that same approach towards language itself, that all approaches to parsing a given matter that's expressed in language are somehow equally valid and equally arbitrary, which is absolutely not the case. So I do think that was interesting, It's it goes to show you that you can kind of carve out sets of ideas according to specific values. So, I think his position on education is one of an intuitive deliberator. But his position on language is one of an intuitive, subjective deliberator. And that's where he's going to run afoul of me. And, when he's talking about relationships and stuff, I would imagine he's got more insight than I do. When he's talking about sort of people accepting themselves, maybe. I mean, except for the fact that I have cognitive functions, which gives me an insurmountable advantage in basically every area. But that's not an ENTP, ENFP thing. That's a Eric versus the world thing, Regardless. it ultimately proves difficult to be the guy who sees the lines in the road as all the other drivers around him are apparently not seeing the lines and swerving in and out of their lane willy-nilly, you know. I guess if I had one piece of advice to give the world, it would be stay in your lane. That's my advice to every individual person. Stay in your lane. Don't do what Jeffrey's mom did. Don't assume that your blending of two competing strategies is better than following any specific strategy. For example, trust the strategists. Trust trust a strategist that you want to consult with, or trust a different strategist, but don't try to mix their two approaches together because then you're sure to have one that doesn't work. In that instance, it's like Jeffrey's mom needs to stay in her lane. If she wants to hire me to do a certain job, she needs to get out of my way and let me do that job. See, I talked with some guys about MBTI, but I don't know who those guys were. And since I was drunk, I just talked over them, which isn't very cool, but it is what it is. Well, they don't want to, people don't generally in their engagements with people. I don't think that they necessarily want to learn anything. In general, people don't want to learn things. What do I think? Do I think about the USA governments? Well, I think the USA government, like any Western democracy government, is made up of a lot of distinct individuals with varying agendas. Obviously the Trump administration had a very different agenda than the Obama administration. So, the cool thing is governments don't believe in things, people do. So we don't need to worry about, whether the U.S. government, what the U.S. government packed for lunch. We don't need to worry about that. We don't need to worry about what the U.S. government, whether or not the U.S. government believes in Santa Claus. We don't need to worry about that because only agents believe in things. Only living, conscious agents do. So, in other words, only human beings. My cup does not say Obama. It just says nothing on it. It's just a white cup. Just a plain white cup. The idea that, like, all these various individual people who get elected and who vociferously disagree with each other, that somehow they're all secretly part of the same team or something. I mean, please don't vote. Whatever you do, please don't vote. So what in the world made you think you're an INFJ, come man? Because I get it. INFJs can piss me off too. My friend Corey certainly has, with his overwrought NI, but I just, I can't really type people from comments and chat and stuff, but like leaving 4 or 5 comments on a video, that's very un-INFJ like. That's very action type like. SE Dom, NE Dom. I don't know, Cone man. I would not. I have no way of knowing except by actually typing you. But I'm just wondering what made you think you were an INFJ. Like, how did you come to that conclusion? Okay, I will. I'll click that. Good morning, Boba Fett. Well, I would agree, Conan 3, that we ought to evaluate whether given policies are consistent with legitimacy concerns first and foremost. True, nations aren't moral agents, but individuals are, and individuals representing people in the government have a responsibility to uphold legitimacy concerns first. Legitimacy concerns are a real criterion against which you might evaluate things, whereas democratic principles is too vague and undefined. Riddle me this: what both is and isn't? To be or not to be? Oh wait, that's or, not and. Okay, well, right. And you feel as though you identify with type descriptions of INFJ. Okay, well, that's certainly one way to determine one's type. The challenging thing for INFJs is that they don't have good subjectivities. They're not good at knowing who they are really. So, uh, that doesn't mean that everyone who self-identifies as an INFJ without getting typed by Eric is wrong. Not at all. But the problem in general with type descriptions is some of them are a lot more flattering than others. Everybody wants to believe they're very intuitive, insightful, creative, smart, whatever. In reality, no sane person should want to be either an ENTP or an INFJ. Because it's just not conducive to a good life, you know. Life's hard when you're intuitive, but there are countless examples of, for example, ESFPs who think they're INFJs, INTJs, ENTPs, whatever, you know. Like, I don't know. People don't like to be informed when what you're informing them runs afoul of what they currently believe. And I've had plenty of instances where I've experienced that in spades, you know. There's this lady I typed named Becky T. I typed her as an ESFP. she came in the other day to a live stream insisting she was an ENFP. I said, okay, well, if you are an ENFP, you should be able to pass this test. I gave a quick test. Acacia demonstrated that she could pass it. I passed it. Becky T left, disappeared because she didn't want to hear the truth. She didn't want to have her supposition tested. She just wanted me to agree with it. Obviously, I can't do that, you know. I don't see type as being an arbitrary thing you decide and then you get those special attributes that the label affords. I look to see if a person actually manifests in ways that are consistent with this label or that label. You know, people use maps differently. Some people, like ESFPs in particular, seem to believe that if you get everyone to agree that you're a given type, then you get to have all those positive attributes or something. Of course, they also tend to believe they have overcome all the deficit areas of that type because, you know, they're not that type. I'm an ENTP who's figured out how to be really self-disciplined and productive is my favorite ESTJ line, you know. Well, I mean, you can't really engage the topic of typology non-intuitively. Like, it is a map first, meaning first kind of perspective. So no, I wouldn't dispute at all, Cone Man, that you're using your NI to engage the topic. You know, I agree with you. You're definitely an NI using type and not an SI using type. I can say that fairly definitively from my conversations with you already that I'm not seeing any SI really here being manifest in as a conscious function. You know, you're not referencing a lot of your personal experience, etc. But we don't know what slot that it's in at all. You know, it could be dominant. It could be dominant, but habituated to, you know, like I said before, bullshit in, bullshit out. If you're intuiting a lot about bad stuff, about wrong conceptualizations of things, then you're obviously not going to get good results from your intuition. However, I would say that you know, the jury's out for me. I don't know. I can't possibly know without typing you. I'd be shocked if I typed you and you turned out to be an SI type because you just don't reference your experience to give specific examples very much at all. But you know, it is what it is. People come in here believing they know their type all the time, and when I ask them why, they give me answers like, well, I've read a lot about the subject, whatever. And I get that that's a fine enough answer, but problem is if you're a knower, it matters the raw material that you're intuiting about. And if the raw material is wrong, then you're going to be led astray. Okay, well, Okay. I don't dispute people's ability to teach themselves things, provided they have an accurate textbook, right? I don't doubt that you can teach yourself typology, but not if you're working from a textbook that's wrong. So, um, one can't teach oneself politics. One can teach oneself argumentation and thereby be correct about politics, but and certainly one needs to do a fair amount of research to be correct about it. But you'd have to be researching the right things or researching for the right reason, not just as a practice of confirmation bias. So I don't know if that's what you're doing or not, but it sounds like it based on the stuff you say about politics, you know? Or would you say INFJ and INFP have equivalently the same vivid and wild imagination in the creative atmosphere? So the thing is, come in three, you're not talking like a receiver talks, right? A receiver is interested in listening to what the person's saying and periodically responding to that. You're interested in driving the discussion and prompting me and getting a response and then me engaging what you're saying, etc. Right? That's very much like an action type. It's very SE dumb. So also you believed Noam Chomsky was an INFJ. So Noam Chomsky, however, is definitely and almost certainly an ENFP. Uh, if you identify with ENFP, it's much more likely that you're an action type TI polar than that you're a receiving type because you're like, this person's like me, right? And I'm an INFJ, but that person's not an INFJ at all. So um, the only commonality I would see between the two of you is possibly a commonality in the relationship with TI. But you know, it's all speculative. I'd say also SE-DOM is consistent with the way that you don't use SI in your general conversations here, but when defending your positions, you reference SI as though we're an absolute value. It sounds very fifth slot, you know. Again, speculative, but that's where all the evidence is consistently pointing currently. So it's something to consider. You won't consider it, but that's fine. It's just that receiving types ultimately have a different frame of reference, you know. Well, I mean, it's impossible for us to make that bet come in three because, I mean, like, you're not challenging. Never mind. I don't want to bang my head against the wall. I mean, INFJs aren't judging types, so MBTI got that backwards, right? INFJs begin with a perceiving function, introverted intuition, so they're not judging types. Regardless, I don't want to bang my head against the wall. I mean, it can in some instances. It can be proven to what should be everyone's satisfaction in some instances. When I type an ISFP, for example, It's very definitive. The polar is very stark, very evident to anybody watching, and the fact that they're not a TI DOM is equally compelling, indisputable, and they really can't be any other type. And in order to convince me in any way, shape, or form that we ought to negate that typing of them, you'd have to do a lot of intellectual work that there's no possible way you've done or are willing to do. So it's like sometimes it can't be proved, but sometimes I do prove it, and it should be proved to everyone's satisfaction. Except to be to everyone's satisfaction, they need to have a full understanding of what I'm saying in general. So again, I'm not going to bang my head against the wall this morning with you. I've done too much of that lately. Something I never do with INFJs for a protracted period of time, although it may happen occasionally. If you got a really damaged one, like my friend Corey, um, yeah, I do butt heads a lot with some types, but very rarely do I have a protracted headbutting going on with actual INFJs. INFJs and ENTPs naturally fit because INFJs are receiving types. Two action types, though, will butt heads a lot because they're both trying to put. Okay, well, fine, come in. Well, I'm sure many INFJs are suffering from trauma. And if that's the case in your case, then that might explain things. I'm having coffee too. I do not get a boost of testosterone from coffee. If anything, it just makes me feel kind of jittery and then makes me tired after it kind of wears off, you know? It doesn't really give me energy. I'll tell you what's very SI5, NI4, SE1 bodybuilding. It's such a SI framed absolute value. It's twisting NI to the service of an overarching SI value and trying to sort of attain metaphysically via the physical body as a means of bypassing that which is not corporeal. Oh my God. That's not corporeal. Let me lift some weights. Anyway, you don't want to hear my evaluation. And who can blame you? You're a highly intuitive guy who's always analyzing and who sees really clearly the truth. And the reason is because of your years of experience reading lots of different things. So, okay. Now, I want to hear about it. SE isn't often talked about in ways that make sense to people. It's always bullshit. I mean, I think SE is legitimately just understood as uh, as as framing things or behavior in keeping with impacts. So, whenever an idea, a perspective idea, is concretized into action, that's extroverted sensing. If you're primarily ideational, then you fundamentally have trouble converting pers- perspective things into actual things. If you're any tool, that's maximally the case. You've got all the ideas you could ever need, more, you ideate for everything, whether it's appropriate or not, and your blind spot is acting on any of those ideas accordingly. Now, to be an extroverted sensor in the dominant slot is going to play out in certain ways in communication if it's paired with a non-communicative deliberation function. So SEFI plays out as a kick the anthill kind of approach to engagement. Um, doesn't really matter what's being said specifically, as long as it's a reaction to your prompt. It treats language itself as though, in that instance with SEFI, um, as though we're just as though we're like an instigatory action in the real world, like a you know. You saw Trump masterfully use that to avoid consequences for the duration of his presidency. Namely, when people got in an uproar about thing A, he'd kick the anthill over here at thing B. They'd get all upset about this and they'd forget about thing A, etc. You know, that's a very SE way of using language. But really, what you're saying there is being an SE Dom defines, constrains how your extroverted intuition plays out in certain predictable ways. It's important to remember that every individual is either an action type, a deliberation type, a knowledge type, or an interface type. And you can predictably expect certain kinds of interactions with everything accordingly. Like Jeffrey's mom keeps going back to the college counselor, so the college counselor keeps giving her new advice because they're both interface types and they believe in that. Take a step, do a check, adjust, take a step, do a check, adjust. That's the interface sort of approach to things, right? It doesn't matter that this essay is not appropriate for an interface approach. You need to take an action deliberation approach because, unlike a debate round, you're not engaged responsibly with the other party. You get to send one fully formed and realized expression of self, and you don't know enough about them to interface, right? You can't check, adjust, because the only thing you can do is continue checking and adjusting on this side without any further new information or any kind of responsiveness from the other side. Once you send it, they get one chance to look at it and they respond however they respond, which you won't even know. You'll only know whether you got accepted to that college or not. So that requires an action deliberation approach frame to do it well, not an interface frame. Interface frame will continue checking, adjusting forever until they've got just this mess of, it's like they'll keep adding ingredients and stuff to the soup until it's just a complete disaster. We got no vision behind it. It's not going to end up well, right? Um, deliberators like FISE plays out very differently than SEFI. You can see the way that Hierolam engages is much more deliberator engagement, asks more questions, and additionally, um, you can see in a lot of his chats the way he's engaged emotionally with whatever it is he's talking about. Which is not to say that's a bad thing at all, right? It's like he's talking about things that are important to him, things that link to what he finds precious and what he finds appalling and what he thinks comprises essentially like degenerateness, you might say. I don't know what type Carlos Paeva is, but the way he engages seems, like he's probably deliberation type, might be a knowledge type, but definitely isn't an action or interface type. Again, I've been wildly wrong trying to type people from the chat before. So I'll throw that disclaimer out there. I know from plenty of experience that I cannot successfully type people from the chat. But I also know from experience that usually manifests as me, say, believing an ISFJ in chat is an NTP, or believing an INFJ in chat is an ENFJ, or maybe even an ENTP, like believing an ENFJ like Ruben. If I were to type him from chat, I might think he's an ENTP. That would have been wrong. Those are the kind of mistypings I'm likely to do from chat. I think I'm less likely to mistype somebody who in chat seems like an introvert as an extrovert. Like I'd never mistype KE as an introverted mugity meow based on her chat behavior. So I mean, I'm familiar with Quadros. What you mean by Templar Crusader? I don't. I may have read it. I probably have, but I wasn't especially interested in the metaphors. Okay, Conman. Well, you can believe what you want, but we can't link type to specific outcomes like that. So, in other words, not every ENFP in any way, shape, or form is going to build a brand around themselves. In fact, I think ENFPs, by and large, run the gamut of those who feel empowered by the world and thus take that sort of route, and those who feel wildly disempowered by the world and can't handle the notoriety. Like there was an ENFP on YouTube a while back. I forget what her name was, but uh, she basically found it too bruising to be a YouTuber. You know. On the other hand, Russell Brand, ENFP, he seems to build a brand around himself. Uh, you get somebody like Robin Williams who continued to work but found no pleasure in being a public figure at all, but definitely also an ENFP. So, they run the gamut. If you're trying to type people based on those kind of things, then you're basically it's the same as trying to type people on affect or just on self-reporting or just on any other vector that's not determinate at all. You got to evaluate people on their cognitive functions, not on how they turned out in life. You know, you can't type people correctly like that. Oh, you're an electrician? You must be an ISTP. Well, Spacey, an INTP that I knew, was an electrician because countervaluing NI, he had chosen a terrible job path for himself and ended up in a job that required a lot more TESE than he was able to consciously provide it, and probably had a difficult time doing the task, right? So you really have to be careful about that kind of stuff. To think that you can type somebody based on like what their job is or how they turned out in life. The fact that Spacey turned out to be an electrician does not mean he's not an INTP. Yeah, Brand is an ENFP, but not all but not all ENFPs are Russell Brand, right? And there, you can think of plenty of instances where the exact opposite of what you say is the case. So using that to type people is irresponsible, frankly. Have I ever played Rocket League? Rachel will probably like it too, since she said she likes games like Mario Kart and it's for free. I'm checking out Baldur's Gate 2. It's on sale right now. I got Baldur's Gate, but I can't play it yet. But I will be able to play it in the coming year. I'm gonna have to buy a new laptop. Anyway, C.S. Joseph, you need to remember, like types people wildly wrong. Types me as ESTP, types himself as ENTP. Uh, right there, he's mistyped himself and he claims to be a typology expert. You ought to have real concerns about his legitimacy as a typology expert if his expertise can't even successfully type himself or me correctly. And he gets sensor and intuitive backwards, right? Like, how am I a sensor? In what fucking world am I an ESTP? You have to warp all the definitions of all the cognitive functions to think that completely, right? An extroverted intuitor is somebody who does this, who does what I'm doing, who's able to actually talk about it and engage about ideas on the fly for hours at a time and find it the most natural thing in the world. That is absolutely not what C.S. Joseph is doing, right? He's he's not explaining things. He's providing answers in an environment in which he's not subject to any actually being challenged about anything, right? Have you ever attempted to challenge him on any of his ideas? Have you ever asked him any hard questions? If not, then there's no reason to think you're engaging with his stuff in a meaningful way, right? Because he can't answer those things. ESTPs do talk a lot, actually. My daughter's an ESTP and she talks quite a bit. Often when we're hanging out with her, she's chattering away, telling us stuff, and we're listening because I love listening to my daughter talk. Taylor's an ESTP who talks probably less than my daughter, but the difference between an ENTP and an ESTP is an ESTP will do something like Taylor's doing, right? he doesn't need to generate that much extroverted intuition on his own. He gets to comfortably sit within his autopilot extroverted intuition, let other people's extroverted intuition be subject to his TI critique. It's perfect. And also, the way he manages it in terms of impacts is very SE rather than TE. In contrast, C.S. Joseph's approach to everything is exceedingly TE. Instead of engaging ideas and critiquing them with his superior TI, like an ESTP would, or generating ideas and responding to ideas with ideational flows like I do, like an ENTP would, he shuts down engagement with the ideas and relies upon a notion of expertise via specific things he's learned from other people that justify his positions, rather than justifying his positions with actual justifications and defending his positions like I do or Taylor would. Yeah, Flow State's great. I like him a lot. He's a good guy. And he succeeds too, because I am subject to I read everything. Here on says I can see kind of what Eric meant about Cone Man now, like driving forward stuff. He kind of tells you stuff, but almost like he's controlling the discussion and successfully doing so. Um, he keeps kicking the anthill on the metaphysical field, and I keep responding by trying to return order to the ant colony, which is in my mind not the people, but the general splay of ideas being expressed, right? But he certainly is he's either purposefully and knowingly or willfully and unknowingly um, continuing to trigger me with various things that he anticipates will, often or usually heretofore they do or have. But as I explain what's happening correctly, I develop increasing immunity to it, presumably. We'll see how that plays out over the long haul. Coneman 3 says INFJ are catalysts for change. Cool. Pterodactyl. Is that when you redact a pterodactyl from the CIA report on pterodactyls? INFJ most likely to bring change in the world like Hitler and Jesus. Cool. So, I would like to get something accomplished today. Coneman 3 says, we see the cracks in the matrix. Cool. Do you repair those cracks as well? A pterodactyl is also known as history's most dangerous bird. Lots of bizarre people on flow state panels. Like, well, you know, he starts the whole process. It's still in its growth phase, with taking who he can get as people to be on the panel. Presumably, as his channel grows and if it becomes more successful and stuff, he'll be able to be more selective about who gets on the panel. Coneman 3 says, most people in my life don't know the real me, only online, and am I this assertive? Cool. I wonder why you think your online self is more real than your real world self, though. Each of them represents half of the self, right? Wing redacting. The pterodactyl was flying on two redacted, period. Speaking of Korean, I have been watching Korean shows lately on Netflix because we're in between anime seasons. Real world people either are not interested or don't listen. I see. Well, sorry to hear that. Conman 3 says, I communicate better in writing. Okay. Most people do. When writing, you have more time to think about it, you have a chance to edit it. It should be the case that most people express themselves better in writing. But, you know, it's not necessarily the case. I express myself about the same, but I still do express myself better in writing because I'm more concise. Acacia asks, is there a runner-up type you would ever consider yourself to be at Conman? I'm curious about that too. I've watched some people, for example, do the same dumb shit over and over again, get the same results, but they aren't aware what they're doing somehow. Well, I mean, depending on how you look at it and frame it, you might conceivably say that about me, you know? That Eric, you keep live streaming, doing the same thing over and over again. Many of the live streams complaining about how you aren't doing something more productive, etc. What do you expect different results? Well, to that I'd respond, I'm not just this moment in time. And this moment in time, I am talking about that subject, but that's probably part of my process towards actually working on something that I feel pleased to be working on. Welcome in 3, you're right about that. Jung the INFJ thought he was INTP. You can tell them what may happen or whatever, but they won't listen, so. I mean, I guess that's the difference between me and the people you're talking about is I will listen and respond to whatever anybody's saying usually, unless it's just overtly hateful. Speaking of overtly hateful, it seems like since my decision to go on offense against Cookie weakness, he's disappeared. He's no longer harassing Rachel or me. I don't know if you guys remember this particular set of events from the history of talking with famous people. That's fine. Here I am. That's very considerate of you, though. I appreciate how considerate you are. I would point out that given your thinking there, you may be sometimes being a little hard on yourself. Um, so the thing is, we all experience instances of strong conflict with others we engage with some of the time. And that conflict is almost always linked to one of two things. In fact, it's hard for me to imagine it being linked to anything else, but it's either linked to trauma on the part of one party or it's linked to values conflicts. So, you know, ultimately, Chow Hua really made me mad, and that conflict was was a values conflict, was two different values conflicts intersecting at the same time to create like a value conflict overload on my part. One of them being an interface frame instead of action deliberation, and the other being an FE and I frame that is sort of like professional sovereignty, where if you're going to hire me to do a job, don't hire somebody else to critique the job I'm doing and then ask me to make changes. The idea that insanity equals doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is an old notion. I don't remember who originally said it. I think it's Einstein who originally said the quote. But it gets referenced a lot. People may or may not know that it's a reference to that. They may think that in wherever they encounter it, it's naturally occurring to that. But it's actually an allusion to that quote. What I often do is ask people questions just to get their opinions. I don't assume they are right, but they often assume I think they know more than me. Okay, well, I suppose it would depend on the individual people you're talking to, what you're talking about, and what your respective areas of expertise are. It's not so much doing the same thing over that's the problem. It's being aware of it, I guess. Like, you're so dumb, you just don't know any better. Well, it's for me, it's the correctability of the thing. Like, what's frustrating with Chow Hua is when I keep doing the same thing over and over again is that's a good point, Cone Man 3. That's an excellent observation. Cone Man 3 falsifies Einstein's quote by pointing out that Apple keeps making iPhones and keeps getting the same results. Excellent point. Yes, Einstein's quote is applicable to the world of meaning in some way, but not to the world of business. Anywho, uh, in fact, such an excellent point, Cone Man 3. I'm going to give you a wonder point. You earned it. Um, so, you know, ultimately, in the world we have what we know, and we have what we deliberate as two components of what we think slash believe, how we think slash believe. Oh yeah, I forgot to finish talking about that. So anyway, there was this guy who was, well, I mean, what am I gonna do, right? He was like active in the live streams for a while. He was, and he'd say like body shaming stuff to Rachel. He called her cell phone, left body shaming messages for her, and he'd have some girl in the background, you know. And you know, at some point it happened. You know, he persisted off and on for quite some stretch of time. And on one occasion, you know, I had determined at that point that ignoring it, while usually a good approach, wasn't going to work this time. So I was really mad, and I went on this whole assault, calling him cucky weakness, and explaining to whatever girl he was with that this horrible, toxic little shit, you know, was not a good person to um, hit your wagon to. And generally, I attacked his manhood, etc. And that was the occasion during which he got the name Cucky Weakness and Bride of Cucky for Cucky Weakness's girlfriend, which was something that Ruben made up. Cucky Weakness and Bride of Cucky, uh, I haven't heard a single peep from them since. So I wonder, if that's just incidental, coincidental, and timing, or if there's a causal relationship there. Anyway, I guess I'll never know. Hopefully, I never want to encounter the fucking person again. Obviously, yeah, he was harassing my actual wife. He was actually calling her phone. I found her phone number somehow. Was calling it, leaving hateful, body shaming voice messages. But well, you know, self-reporting is unreliable in certain circumstances. You know, F bipolar. What defines it? Uh, I would say it's my response the other day when I was talking about it. What I said the other day when I was talking about it. F bipolar asked me to put myself in another person's shoes. The problem is that can't possibly tell me anything because my feet are bigger than theirs. I don't wear that style of shoes. And if I were to wear that style of shoes or try it on, I wouldn't appreciate it for any of its virtues. I would just dislike the fact that it wasn't the style of shoes I wanted to wear. In other words, I don't care how great your loafers are. I'm not going to learn anything about your life from wearing your loafers, except how much I hate loafers. Would I eat polar bear? Maybe if it were roadkill, you know. I would not turn down a piece of recently roadkilled polar bear. In that case, the killing of it was accidental, and you might as well eat it rather than have it go to waste. Yeah, I don't think I've encountered any action types who like jigsaws or crosswords. Cooking's more likely to be an SI thing than an SE thing, and chores around the house, well, that's maximally attained by TESI. So I get that you self-report lots of things that you believe are consistent with INFJ. I get it. No, I hear you, Cone Man. You continue to self-report lots of things that you believe are consistent with INFJ and uh and or things that are inconsistent with action type or SE dom. And I've determined, and I've already factored in the fact that you self-report this a lot. So it's 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 one of many factors to consider. You know, let's leave it at that. Well, with Cone Man 3, there are infinite possible physical tasks that one might do and other tasks that one might do. You know, it's unavoidable that every individual is going to find some of those kinds of physical tasks, the more boring ones, more boring, right? Also, I don't want to get into it. I don't want to argue with you. Hi, Eric. My son is a big fan. It would mean the world if you typed him INFJ. Sure, no problem, honey. No problem. I'd probably be a lot more successful if I just said like made it official on my typing document. Like you can buy a regular typing session for $100, or for $200 you can buy a 15-minute typing session in which I'll tell you whichever type you are is whichever type you want to be. Okay. So you tell me in advance which type you want to be, and I'll tell you which type I am. I'd probably have more takers for that one. I'll tell you why you're that type. Surprisingly difficult to build an igloo, the native Inuit are master snow craftsmen. You know, I'm aware of that fact actually. Here I am, and I'll tell you why. Because I watched one of those survival shows one time where they went out and tried to make an igloo. And the guy was like, I don't remember if it was Les Stroud or if it was Bear Grylls or something, but they they just found themselves completely unable to do it. It was they found it like impossible. The thing is, you it seems impossible to me because you got to kind of build an arc up and have it not fall apart until it gets to the top when you put in the centerpiece that prevents it from falling apart. You know, seems really hard to make. I'd be much more inclined to make a snow cave than an igloo, right? You just find a hill with a snowbank on it and you dig into the snowbank and make a snow cave. Why would you bother trying to carve out, bricks of ice and build an igloo? It just seems a very inefficient way to build a snow house. When um, you have already prepared snowbanks. I was sent to change the world. Sent by whom? Was it your parents? Um, like thinning ahead the entire time, thinking ahead the entire time, every piece fits another. Yeah, that's got to be difficult to do. Gyroscope, gyroscope, death metal song, gyroscope, gyrolam, death metal man, gyrolam, and gyroscope. There you go. Hi, Carlos Paiva. Just a feeling. I don't believe in a God. Well, so when do you plan to implement this change? Hero Lamb is here indeed. Boba Fett is his sturdy steed. Carlos Paiva, pay him heed. Acacia is around. Coneman 3 is here as well, and he is making cell of a type identity that he informs us he must be. You are Hero Lamb's sturdy steed. Loyal steed. Is that what it is? Sturdy steed, loyal steed. Which do you have? A gyroscope is a mechanical or electronic device that utilizes the principle of angular momentum to maintain its orientation relative to the Earth's axis or resist changes in its orientation. In other words, it weebles, but it won't fall down. I mean, it wobbles, but it won't fall weeble. They dumbed themselves down for the guests. Bobby and Bananistan. I don't know where Bobby is. I banned him sometime back. If he really wants to come around again, he can always come around as a new identity. If he doesn't, then I can't say I miss him. In one sense, you are what you honestly believe you are. Discuss. Well, in an entirely subjective sense, you are whatever you honestly believe you are. And that will either be consistent or inconsistent with objective assessments. And if you're subjective and your objective are consistent, then you don't worry about it. If your thing is resonant with subjectives consistently, and you only prioritize or value subjectives, then it doesn't really matter, really, because you aren't worried about whether things are consistent with objectivities. It doesn't matter to you. You know, it may matter to other people. It makes you unreliable in your self-reporting, perhaps, but it doesn't matter to you. If you're wholly objective in your approach at the expense of subjectivity, well, then you're not going to have any problem because subjectively you want to be objective. So, you know, the only people who end up in distress are people who want to be objective, can't get an objective analysis of things, and don't really have clarity about what they subjectively want to be. Like Rachel didn't know what type she was until after we got together and were together for about a month. She prior thought she was ENFP, and then I typed her as ENFJ when I first typed her. Um, she was in a certain amount of distress because she needed some objective external party to inform her what type she was because she had such poor linkage to her own subjectivities. She couldn't accurately self assess. She didn't have adequate access to either her SI, her personal experience to reference in defense of one type or another, nor adequate access to her FI. She didn't really know what she wanted to be, right? She wanted it to be the correct thing so she could better know who she was. Uh, that's consistent with INFJ, but it's not exclusive to INFJ. Like some INFJs certainly do successfully determine their type. They're unlikely to exert much energy defending it on the grounds that whatever they're likely to express is likely to be interpreted in whatever way the person who's hearing it wants to interpret it. That might be how they think about it, you know. Anyway, you've successfully provoked discussion on the point you raised. Congratulations. It's a good question. I mean, a good point to discuss. Certainly worth discussing. You Shook Me All Night Long is a good track. Yeah. Let's see what the lyrics of that song are. She was a fast machine. She kept her motor clean. She was the best damn woman that I ever seen. She had the sightless eyes telling me no lies, knocking me out with those American thighs, talking more than share, had me fighting for air. She told me to come, but I was already there, 'cause my walls started shaking, the earth was quaking, my mind was aching, and we were making it. You shook me all night long. You shook me all night long. Working double time on the seduction line. She is one of a kind. She's just a mine, all mine. No applause, just another course. Made a meal out of me and come back for more. Had to cool me down to take another round. Now I'm back in the ring to take another swing. That the walls were shaking, the earth was quaking, my mind was aching, and we were making it. You shook me all night long. You knocked me out. I said, you shook me all night long. You had me shaking, and you shook me all night long. That's the end of this song. What do you think about that one? How about this one? Living easy, living free. Season ticket on a one-way ride. Asking nothing, leave me be. Taking everything in my stride. Don't need reason, don't need rhyme. Ain't nothing that I'd rather do. Going down, party time. My friends are gonna be there too. I'm on the highway to hell. Highway to hell. Yeah, that's another AC/DC song. There you go, everybody. AC/DC songs galore for everybody. INFJ and ISFJ can end up imprisoned by others. I notice slaves to being proper or whatever. Fuck that shit. It's all right to a point, but can be restricted. If the other people are like shit tier, they will still appease them out of being nice. I agree with you there, Hero Land. Well, that's why every ISFJ/INFJ needs an ESTP/ENTP to help them, because I won't allow Rachel to be railroaded by shit tier people, as you call them, shit tier. Is there anything below shit tier? Is vomit tier below shit tier? I'm curious. Your mother. Your mother likes Freebird? Sewer tier. Sewer tier would be lower than shit tier. You're right, Carlos Paiva. That's a good point. Sewer tier. Because sewer tier includes all the gross stuff in one big gross soup. Right, shit does go down literally directionally into the sewer as well. You make an excellent point, Carlos Paiva. I think you win the round of what's the lower tier than shit tier. I haven't listened to much Leonard Skinner, I will admit, Hero Lamb. I've heard what he used to play on the radio. Don't they also play Sweet Home Alabama? Or is that somebody else? What's the prize? One wonder point, Carlos Paiva. That's the prize. You get one wonder point. You earned it. And you double earned it by prompting me successfully, linking back to my own words in a way that necessitated you be afforded a wonder point as a prize. See, diarrhea tier is still above sewer tier, because sewer tier includes not just your own diarrhea, but everyone else's diarrhea too. But not everything that's physically below diarrhea is below diarrhea in terms of tier. So magma is not a lower tier than sewer. Pretty good lyrics. I agree. Pretty good lyrics. Pretty good rock and roll lyrics. A good rock and roll band. I don't think anybody could fairly dispute the affording of AC/DC at least that status. A good rock and roll band. Oh yeah, it's a pretty. I picked the shiniest one out of the box for you, Carlos Bay. Every morning before I begin live streaming, I do put out in front of me a box of Wonder Points. And then I just picked the shiniest one from the box and give it to you. So I am running low on this box. We actually put this box out yesterday. Didn't use up all the Wonder Points I set out. Unlike the Arizona defense, which used up all of the turnover balls in last night's game. In last night's football game. So Arizona has this tradition. They have what's called a turnover trident. Okay, it's like a Neptune's trident thing. It's got a stabby part in the middle. And when they get a turnover, they have balls set aside for this purpose. The person who gets the turnover gets to put that ball on the stabby thing, right? And they they get and set aside balls with the opponent's name on it. So the football and that they were putting on the stabby thing said Oklahoma on it. So there's this lady who both designed and made the trident, and who is responsible for bringing in the balls and stuff. Okay, it was her idea, I guess. So anyway, she only brought 5 balls because she figured there's no way they're going to get more than 5 turnovers. Well, the Arizona defense got 6 turnovers last night. 6. Pretty remarkable. It was funny because, like, after the first half, I was like, things do not look good for Arizona because Arizona's gotten 3 turnovers already, and they're still behind. They're down by a point. So, because Arizona started the game up 14-0, then Oklahoma came roaring back, went up 24-14. But Arizona still had more turnovers ahead of them, ended up with 6 and won the game by, I think, 2 touchdowns, maybe 10 points or something. It was an exciting game. I was shocked because as we moved into the third quarter, Arizona's offense wasn't doing anything. They continued to hold Oklahoma, but Oklahoma was threatening, But then Arizona would get another turnover. It was crazy, I kept thinking, okay, they're going to lose this game because they're not going to continue to get turnovers throughout the whole game as a means of preventing Oklahoma. Those 2 birds are arguing over cutlets. Don't argue over cutlets, guys. Let me show the people you little birds. 3 little birds on my doorstep. Oh, they just flew away. Singing sweet songs. Messages pure and true. Three little birds. There's 1, 2, 3. 3 little birds on my doorstep. There's more little birds. They're cutlet lovers. They're a bunch of filthy cutlet lovers. Let's not lie to ourselves. They're only here for the cutlets. They don't actually like me at all. I'm just buying my woodland friends. You need to be nice. Don't be a bully bird, okay? Nobody likes a bully bird. I suppose they want more cutlets, It's been a while since I put any out. Well, this is going to scare you all away, but I'll put out more cutlets. Okay, well, I put out more cutlets. And I even remember to close the garage door. What a good job I've done. That's fine work, Eric. Fine work indeed. There was some task I was going to do this morning while I was streaming. You know, I now remember what it is, actually, surprisingly, agreeably. I'm going to empty the dishwasher. Oh, right. There's the other. I remember the other. I'm not really sure I'm quite ready to take everything down, but the next thing to go is this. Well, I guess the next thing to go is this mantelpiece over here. But books on typology can be hard to find. And the problem with the books you can find is that they're not correct. So, as we discussed the other day, I should write a typology book rather than live streaming in the morning while I have my burst of adder energy. Yeah, I know. I understand I need to do that. That is my next project. I probably won't get started on it today, but I'm planning to take this weekend off from Adderall. And it's something that I could see myself starting on Monday. Now that I have a clear vision about how to structure things. You know, with a frame of the analogy of modeling the solar system, I think I can do a good job of explaining cognitive functions in terms of setting up initially what we're trying to do in a frame of reference that's very corporeal, that people can easily understand, and for which the analogs therefore will be informative. And the biggest problem typology has, like a lot of messy spots in the world, is that it doesn't understand what it's trying to do in general. People don't understand what typology is. They don't ask the question like, what is an articulation of personality exactly? And how can we distinguish something that's part of your personality from something that's just part of what you're into right now? If I'm putting the dishes away right now, does that make occasionally putting the dishes away part of my personality? Well, no, because you can imagine a situation where there's a maid or something, and it's expressly their job to put the dishes away, in which case I would get out of their way and let them do their job, you know? I wouldn't try to sometimes do their job. But because this is sort of unofficially Rachel's job, I don't mind doing it because I think, well, it's an act of service. Like, you know those love languages? One of those acts of service. That's one of my love languages. I like doing acts of service, but I don't like gift giving. And I like quality time. But I'm not really that into physical touch. And what's the other one that they have? Words of affirmation. I do provide words of affirmation, but I'd say that really I'm more responsive to words of affirmation than I am providing of them. But I'm not necessarily super responsive to words of affirmation even. It's just that I don't want words of negation, you know. I'm happy as getting the authentic affirmation that occurs when Rachel laughs at a joke I made. Because she doesn't laugh at the jokes that aren't funny, she only laughs at funny stuff. A lot of bowls. A lot of bowls. We've got so many bowls. How many bowls do you have, Eric? So many bowls that you wouldn't even believe how many bowls we have. Just look at all these bowls. I am the king of bowls. Would you guys agree that I'm the king of bowls? I hope so. I desperately hope that you agree that I'm the king of bowls. You might be saying, but Eric, are you sure you aren't the king of cups? Well, I'm more like the queen of cups, but I'm the king of bowls. I hope you guys respect my sovereignty in the area of bowls. All right, what's next on the agenda bobenda? I'd say it's booty. Yes, I'd say it's booty. What's another word for pirate treasure? Why, I'd say it's booty. Okay, let's empty these things now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to position you over here by where you want to be, the heart of all the action, the kitchen sink. Because it is, in fact, here where I shall pour out these candle things. Throw this away, this gross old wet candle, and put this thing over here. I kind of am annoyed by the fact that there are still light switches in my house that I have no idea what they do, if anything. It must do something, but I don't know what it is. Oh, right, that's what I'm doing. I'm leaving you here by the kitchen sink. I wonder if she wants these styrofoam things back. We have to give her back these glass things, you know. This is attached to this, so I can't seem to make it come on. So she'll get this one back at least, so I might as well just give them all back to her. Okay. Okay. Come on, you glass things. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm done with that. Now, let's play outside glasses cigarette coffee. Seeing outside makes me want to go out there with the trees. The inside is like a prison, even if it's nice. Well, you and I are on the same wavelength, I guess, because I just felt like going outside too. Primarily to look at this hill over here where I do have something of a physical project in mind. Then I planned, oh shit, there's something else I gotta do today. I need to put down that goddamn gravel by my mailbox before the mailman lady comes. Alright. At least if she sees we're getting a start on it, she'll maybe take it easy on us or something. Oh, I never picked up this either. I forgot about it. I gotta pick up this extension cord, which I detached from the roof. What is this? It looks like grass cat puke is what it is. I'll just leave that grass cat puke too. But I've got to wrap up these cords here. So, here we go. Here we go with the wrapping part. Like this. Because we wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Good tidings we bring to you and all of our friends. So, good tidings we bring and a Happy New Year. So, bring us some figgy pudding. Just bring us some figgy pudding. Would you bring us some figgy pudding? And a Happy New Year? What do you mean you don't serve Happy New Year? And if you don't serve figgy pudding, then who does? So what I want to do is I want to make some steps on the hill here. Some steps going down there. So I can walk down steps to the shed area down there. rather than walking down the little road or going down the little road down there. So that's what I want to do. Will I do that? I don't know. But at least I have clarity about something I want to do. I know I want to do that. How about a slide? No, thank you. I don't want a slide. I want stairs. It's more or less impossible to walk down this hill during certain parts of the year, or really all parts of the year. You're going to get a lot of stickers in your socks or your pants or whatever. And, it's just kind of a wilderness hike to walk down this hill. I'd rather have some steps. In fact, I'd eventually like to extend the steps around that tree down there. This one. Around it this way. And down into the gully down there. Wear boots. Well, I've had writing projects in the past. I've completed multiple writing projects, but I also have incomplete writing projects. So I wrote a book about grammar, about sentence diagramming. I think it's a great grammar book. And I wrote well, I've written a lot of curriculum, but I wrote a novel called Gospel of the Pantheon. I've completed a novella called Megalomaniacs. I finished a bad critical thinking book that I decreasingly used any part of his curriculum as I generated more curriculum as I was teaching the class. But that I could now compile into a good critical thinking book in terms of curriculum, like a textbook, if I wanted to. But I need to complete a few sections, I've got all these great worksheets for conditional logic, but like I don't have any done for if and only if. I haven't completed the sequence. Writing projects are kind of a uniquely challenging kind of project because there's two ways to write. You can start out with a clear vision that you have to then realize, or you can start out with a less clear vision that you then you kind of have to generate a lot more sculpture than you're going to end up with, and then carve out of that the sculpture you want. Either approach can be a challenge. The idea of writing a book about typology increasingly appeals to me because it'll allow me to fully frame out what I mean by defensible typology, and in that framing, I can I can explain that very few people can talk about typology as a subject, but unless they're understanding it through this frame, they aren't talking about defensible typology, and they also aren't talking about typology that's defensible in a way that's defensible. So, because defensibility requires that you establish certain elements of a case, right? The affirmation has the burden to affirm. They have to meet certain criteria to be considered prima facie burdens to meet before their aff can even be considered as an aff. You know, it's got to have certain elements in place. So, um, hopefully that'll constrain some of, if I successfully accomplish that, it'll constrain some of the critique by keeping the focus at the frame level, so that the person who's potentially negating is negating against my framework before they try to negate against, you know, negating within my framework before they try to negate outside of the framework. Because if you're trying to negate outside of my framework, but I'm not claiming to affirm within the framework you're negating in, then your negation is non-topical. So, hopefully that probably will have no impact at all on how people deal with me. But at least then I'll be able to say, well, read my book. Wouldn't it be wonderful if that's how things turn out? Eric, you're in charge of your own choices and future. Don't pretend like things just happen and you have nothing to do with it. Okay. I'll pretend things happen and I do have something to do with it. That's not how life has played out thus far. It seems like things just happen, you know? Like, I don't know why things happen the way they do. They just happen that way. Of course, I don't take that approach to instances where I fail. I take full responsibility for every failure all the time to my own detriment. So that would suggest a lack of objectivity in my self-analysis. So much prioritizing objective critique that I do myself the disservice of not objectively evaluating my strengths. But I've tried to do away with false modesty. I guess it's a genuine, deep-seated lack of self-worth. Oh well. Parcel courier is such a British way of saying mailman. I love it. I'm tired already. It's 9:30 a.m. and I'm already tired. Well, wonderful friends, adored friends, friends whom I cherish, internet pals, amigos of the ether sphere. Let me inform you of the following. I have a job to do this morning. It's not a job I want to do, but additionally, it's not a job that when I do it, that I can take you with me. And the reason I can't take you with me is it's all the way up at the top of the driveway, out of the reach of my internet. So, I would like to this morning get the gravel poured. It's not a big job, but I'm going to have to not be live streaming when I do it. It won't take a super long time. There's a good chance I'll live stream again later. But if I don't, I hope you have a very pleasant day and evening. If I do, then I just hope you have a very pleasant day, because I wish you a very pleasant evening later on. Okay. Never had a job I enjoyed is a good first line to a country song. So goodbye, good night, and good luck. I wish you peace on earth and a very happy new year.